Consideration and estoppel is the law topic that we decided to pick. For an example, what consideration is when you give something for value, such as me giving my computer in exchange for a car. So now these values might not equal, but as long as you're exchanging a value, something else for value, then that is consideration. Estoppel, which is Crabb versus Aaron DC in 1976, is about equity and the mitigate the rigors of the strict law. As you can see above me, it prevents a person from insisting on his strict legal rights when it would be inequitable for him to do so, having regards to dealing which has taken place between the parties. What this means is when people are entering into a contract, they would claim that they lacked consideration, and when they are doing this, they are kind of scamming the other side, the other party of the contract. And when you are introducing promissory estoppel to the contracts, that makes them be binded by the contract, which is why it is so important. And they can't weasel their way out of a contract that they should be binded to, because they claim that they are lacking consideration. The evolution of the law goes hand to hand with the impact of the law. Because of the evolution of the law, many people had to have less impact in their business and didn't lose as much as some other companies. Such as 3 cases in 2018, because of this law, they could not get out of their contract. Isnell versus Hudson in 2006 is a case that is a very good example for promissory estoppel and the evolution of the law. This contract with Hudson and Yesnow signed a note for $1.5 million, and Yesnow wanted Hudson to fulfill their obligations and pay the outstanding total of the credit. Now Yesnow was forced to pay back the $1.5 million credit, and this is a good example of promissory estoppel. The evolution of the law is very crucial because it shows how from 1983 to 2018 how businesses and cases are affected, because businesses can lose a lot of money and people can slither their way out of contracts without promissory estoppel. The impact on the law is very great because promissory estoppel is that you promise is enforceable by law. So even without consideration, this was first defined on the first case that we saw in the previous slide, Crabb versus Aaron in 1983. For some more examples on consideration and how it impacts us, there must be a clear agreement that both parties understand, and what they are giving, which is the value, and what they will be receiving, which is the other value. So a contract must have some type of consideration for it to be valid, or it will not be legally enforceable. And this is very important because in the case 671 SW2D, the consideration was that American Fidelity did not have to pay harmless for any amount it might be required to pay under a payment and performance bond. It issued 2 general contracts covering the plumbing and subcontract, which is right there in the PowerPoint. I think, in conclusion, that in consideration and like the cases that lack consideration, promissory estoppel is needed because it makes people not get out of the contracts that they entered, because they could scam somebody else and say that they lacked consideration when the promissory estoppel forces them to be binded to that contract And that is why it is important to have promissory estoppel.